everybody. Welcome back to Reclaim You. Casey is back on the pod today for season 2. Hey, Casey.
Hey.
So, to kick it off, what does Reclaim You mean to you in this season/year of your life?
What does it mean to me? I'm trying to think of what I said last time.
I don't remember
It's
what
not far
anyone
off.
said last time.
It's not far off because I feel like it was something along the lines of like reclaiming authenticity, like finding out who I am, what I want. And I feel like now it's really acting on that, right? So I can have a lot of exploration, right? Did a lot of therapy last year, unburdened a lot of parts, did a lot of things. And I think the scary part of that can be, oh, who am I now? Who am I? But now that I've figured that out, as much as you can, now it's how am I going to act on that? Right? What am I going to fill my time with? What people am I going to fill my time with? What activities am I going to spend my time doing? What do I want for this person? Right? Because what I wanted in the past for that version of me was very different. So you, meaning me, I have a better understanding of her now. Now I want her to do things that maybe she didn't allow herself to do, or thought was weird, or was scared of, or things like that. So it's the action year.
I love it.
Action year.
And I think it probably, and maybe you were really good at this already, but it probably goes in alignment with what we're talking about today. And that is saying no.
Saying no, y'all.
Yeah. Like how to do it, why it's hard, your tips. I was telling Casey before we started, this is great because we're on kind of like two sides of the spectrum here. Like it's still a struggle for me. You're killing it with the no's and the boundaries. I'm still in that messy middle.
Which is so valid and welcome.
Years in the messy middle. Here we are. Yeah. So saying no.
Yes. So I was thinking about this, and I have to, just like all the other lived experiences that we talk about, I wasn't here automatically, right? I grew up in an environment where people pleasing was a means of survival. Being hyper aware of how other people reacted or what other people wanted was a safe thing to do. So I was driven by obligatory yeses. Yes to everything. Yes to activities, yes to feeling a certain way, which was really hard. Yes, I'm going to be quiet. Yes, I'm not going to feel that. Yes. And I think I was like that the first 25 years of my life. And it served me. And I think it's important to remind people of it. The things that you let go of later on in life they served you at a time. So being a yes person, I was reliable. You know, I was someone that people went to. I was someone that people leaned on, and that gave me a sense of worth, a sense of accomplishment, a sense of purpose. And that fueled something that was missing, right? And I don't think it was until, to be honest, I got married. And all of the obligations doubled.
Yep.
And I remember it was a Christmas. I think it was the holidays. And I remember coming home and absolutely like feeling like absolute trash shit. And I was like, is this what's going to happen?
Is this
for the
it?
rest of my life? Because this is unacceptable.
I can't deal with this.
I can't. And so, that was a couple years ago, and I wasn't, I don't think, in therapy at the time, so I wasn't like having any, exploration of why that was like really upsetting to me and why, all these emotions were coming up. I just knew that my past self would just shut them down, right? Like, you just have to do this. It became that story you create, right? I have to do this because if I don't do this, then this is going to happen, and this means that I am this. So that went on for a couple years. And I had conversations with my husband about like, oh, like why did we choose to go to this thing? Or, why did we say yes to this thing? And we started using the word obligation. And something about that word just like set me off. It was like an icky word.
It was an ick.
It was an ick. And I didn't listen to it then. I was like, it's an ick. We all have icks. It's fine. And it wasn't until I started therapy for whatever round that was. And we started talking about growing up and how I might have developed this understanding of saying yes and obligation and people pleasing. And, the more that I healed those parts of me, the less I was reliant on it. So now, being in my 30s, having some therapy under my belt where I actually did the work. Because therapists don't always do the work in therapy. I'm one of them. But this time I didn't. And, the more that I healed certain relationships or acknowledged unhealthy ones, it was easier to say no. So guilt started to dissolve. And, it happened with, some of my immediate people in my life. And I remember, this is a weird story, but this is how it started, was I usually did a very specific thing for a certain person's holiday in my life. And I decided I'm not going to do that thing. It's stupid. It's pointless. I don't know why I'm doing it. I'm doing it because I've done it my whole life. And I didn't. And nothing bad happened.
Nothing bad happened.
Nothing bad happened. Nobody yelled. Nobody screamed. Nobody cut me off. Nothing happened. And so I remember coming home and telling Chris, oh my gosh, I did this thing. And it was so exciting. And it just snowballed from there, really. I mean, to the point now where if I don't want to go to something, I don't go. If I don't want to talk to somebody, I'm not going to. I mean, there's still areas where there could be improvement. We all have that. But I feel like now, if it is impeding my life in a way that I don't like, or if it is taking too much from me, or I'm doing it just for someone else, and I don't have it in my heart to do that, no. And nothing bad has really happened. I mean, have I lost connections with people? Yeah. Did that tell me something? Yes. And that's okay. At the end of the day, I have to do what's good for me. I didn't get to be selfish when I was a kid. And I think a lot of people don't get to be selfish when they're children. So learning how to be selfish in a healthy way and have that balance, right? I still do things for people. I'm not like the most selfish person in the world.
That's making me think too of like, is it selfish or is it self-care? Right? Like we have this idea that being selfish is a bad thing, that we shouldn't be selfish, right? And this goes in alignment with what you're saying with people pleasing and growing up learning these things of doing and giving back and, right, like pleasing, that when we do something for ourselves, it feels wrong in lots of ways because it's quote unquote selfish. But is it selfish? Isn't selfishness the thing in lots of ways to sustain you? Healthy selfishness, like not being a dick, right? Is it self-care? Self-sustaining.
Yeah. Or do we just give the word selfishness a bad rap? We just like, there's plenty of words in our therapy world that we teach people how to have a neutral view of. That selfish has been used as a derogatory term for a long time. I don't have a problem saying I'm selfish. There's not like a shame aura around that word. Like, if I want to be selfish today, I'm selfish today because it gives me the ability to be selfless in other times in my life, which make me feel good too. If you're continuing to say yes, 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 and do all the things, first of all, the quality of your showing up is poor over time. And second of all, it's not going to invigorate you the way that it should, so if you're just doing things for the sake of doing things, that waste of time. Which we've all wasted that time. That's my long-winded story of how I'm so, no.
Where do you feel like you still struggle with the no's? Maybe struggle is a strong word. Do you have like resistance to no's?
Work. Work completely. Totally.
Heard.
Always been my sore spot. Always. I think that's one of those parts of my life that I'm trying to give compassion when I do the thing, right? I set the boundary, or, I don't make myself available when I'm really not. I think it takes time, and it depends on where you're at. If I'm in a headspace where I'm struggling, usually my boundaries are poor. And that's just, it is what it is. It's a lot of energy to acknowledge the emotions that come from doing something that a past you thought was unsafe. So if you don't always have the energy to set these boundaries consistently, that's okay. Know that that's going to impact the situation, but that you're not a failure, you didn't do anything wrong. But yeah.
So what are some, and I feel like I should link to the episode on boundaries and people pleasing as well to go along with this conversation. But what are some tips that you have about saying no? Because I think that saying no it's kind of like it's life altering in lots of ways, and it can be life altering in a really good and positive way. And there can be a lot of loss with saying no and orienting to something different in your life. Saying no to something you've been doing for a really long time that maybe once felt really good and now is really like soul draining. That even though there's a want there's a lot of loss and shifting and orienting to something new. So I'm curious, what kind of tips do you have for folks who are like navigating this feeling maybe drained and wanting something different, but holding just the heaviness of it all?
I mean, the first thing that's coming to my mind is like, I couldn't have done it by myself, like whether that's a therapist, whether that, was my husband. I think something that was helpful was like throwing the narrative out there, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, if I don't do that, then she's not going to love me, and this is going to happen, and blah, 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 blah. Because a part of me knew how that sounded, and intellectually I knew that that was probably not going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
There were still these parts of myself that are trying to get used to this new life that we're trying to live. And that didn't feel good. So I think it's doing something that scares you, and being honest that it does.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like, I think a lot of people won't talk about saying no because it feels dumb.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like, I should just be able to say no.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Or just like all the shame that we create around not doing certain things, right? And I would go through the narrative with my husband, being like, this is going to happen. He's like, what part of you is that coming from? Yes, husband of the year. And I realize, and I think going back to like safe activities, safe behaviors, safe people, when I was trying to set a boundary, a no, do something different. And I think it goes with, many of our podcasts and being authentic and shame and all of those things, that setting a boundary and saying no, if you don't do it at all or often, it's probably unsafe in some way, shape, or form to some part of it.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to counteract that with something else. So will I binge watch one of my favorite TV shows? Yeah. Will I color? Will I, eat my comfort foods? Will I, like things that feel familiar and consistent and show up for me, counteracting this uncertain thing that I'm feeling right now. Because it is uncertain.
Yeah.
You don't actually know what's going to happen. There's that quote, right? The people who have problems with your boundaries are the people who benefited from you having none. That is probably going to happen. You're gonna get some kickback, and that kickback might feel unsafe. So if you have some tools in your back pocket of people, places, things, activities, somatic tools that make you feel and can ride the wave of uncertainty, is gonna be helpful. Does it make it all go away? Does it not feel shitty? Sorry, no. It does feel shitty, and it does feel scary. And, as tiny as like that example that I was mentioning, I was shaking in my boots. Like, it felt huge to me. And I think being able to not shame yourself into how silly that might sound too, I think is a big crux of this. Now, I also want to throw out there, if people are like, oh my God, so many no's, how do you do that? I also have a lot of privilege in my life of like independence and not relying on a lot of people in the world. So like, if you are younger or if you are dependent on people that you feel like you want to set boundaries with, like that is very difficult. So like I'm not here, like this is a very privileged part of my life and I've done a lot of work, and like this is not what is going to be working for everyone, and that sometimes we need to set very micro boundaries. So it's, you know, if you're on the phone with somebody, or you know, you go to dinner with somebody, are you gonna like have somebody in your life call, be like emergency man, so you can get out of there earlier? Like, are you going to allow that to happen? Or, you know, do you take your car so you can leave? You know, these micro moments of I have control in some of this. And you might take the car and you might not leave, but at least you set the intention.
Yeah, I'm thinking to those little like tiny baby steps of even like visualizing. And this is what, you know, I was working on, I don't know, a handful of months ago with my therapist, when it was like, okay, imagine saying that. What happens? And it's like everything goes blank. A part is like, oh, no, 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 we can't do that. Right. And doing these visualizations of, okay, what might feel possible? What might feel possible to say? And just imagining, right? Like maybe not even starting with doing the act, but imagining doing those things and feeling with someone who's safe and can be with you through it. What comes up? And how do you start to work with what comes up so you can establish some like tolerance for maybe even just like a corner of the distress that might come up in the actual act?
Yeah, it's a good micro step, which makes me think of another one that I did with my therapist in the beginning was, can you just set boundaries with yourself? Can you honor a yes for you?
Yeah.
So a yes might be like, I don't really want to fold the laundry right now. I really want to watch Bridgerton. So I'm going to do that. Just be with that, honoring myself in a way. Because even that's uncomfortable. So can I do that with myself? Cool. And just continue to do those things. I think I did that for a long time with my therapist, of like, what feels good to me? Because how can you cut off things in your outside world when you don't have any connection to your inside world?
Yeah.
It doesn't work.
Yeah.
So internal work, imagery, finding your safety. We always come back to this conversation, don't we? Coming back to your own safety and whatever that looks like for you.
I think even for me, a no, which turned into a yes, like a yes and a no, right, was realizing that I had spent a lot of time in front of this computer in this room. And we got the puppy. He's not a puppy so much anymore, but walking the dog. I always used to love our old dog. I used to walk him every morning, and it was just time for me, especially when I had the kids, right? Time for me. Didn't have to talk to anyone but the dog. The no was like sleeping the extra 35 minutes, 40 minutes. The no was that. The yes was getting up, walking the dog, just because it's just me and him. Right. And what's done is it's actually connected me with other people, because there's other people walking their dogs in this little route that we go on. So it's some human connection of hello, and we see the same people every day and we wave and whatever. And it's like, oh, I am a human in the world, because I said no to this part of me that does definitely want to sleep the extra 30, 35 minutes. Right. And yes to this just me time, not responding to anyone else, just us out on the road doing our thing. You know, not every day, but lots of days. There's this, there's like a yes, there's a no.
I love that. I just think about it, and I think like, what a gift just that isolated time with yourself is, especially as a mom. And I like that yes and no, because I think what I'm realizing in going through this podcast with you is the no couldn't have been possible without a yes to me.
Yeah.
At all. You know, so like, people in my life will always laugh and say like, you're so good at just being independent and going out and doing what you want. Like on my days off, I'll go on a date with myself basically and do whatever I want. I'll go to the library, I'll go shopping, I'll get some coffee. That took a lot of work to be able to do that, right? And if you can't rely on yourself in any micro moments, you're dependent on other people's responses to you. Like, that's how you perceive yourself. So being able to learn and perceive yourself, going back to, really, it might have been my first podcast or second, authenticity. Right? Learning who you are
and what you want.
And what you want. And that when you build that relationship and it feels safe enough, you know, you can do things for yourself and it will matter to you. Right? If you're not doing things for yourself, you have nothing to drive you to set a boundary, like if I hadn't, at times when I said yes, my life was driven on saying yes. And if I didn't have anything to do, it wouldn't be, what does Casey want? It's, what does anybody need? Anybody need anything? I'll do it for you. And that shift, you don't realize, at least I didn't realize when it happened, but it did happen eventually. Where, why am I getting the ick? Why am I resentful? Why is my tolerance really low for whatever bullshit is happening in my life? Okay, maybe that's a me problem that I can take care of slowly.
Yeah, it's that resentment and maybe, the resentment and the feeling like totally burnt to a crisp, that I hate getting to that point. And I know in a couple of areas in my life, I am there, and then feeling the weight of responsibility to do things for people. And part of that is being a mom and having little kids. So like fully acknowledging that. Otherwise, right, like where else is bleeding into this sense of crushing responsibility and feeling so burnt out. And it's like, okay, I don't like feeling this way. And then it bleeds into all the other areas of life. So got to start to make some shifts. What are my yeses? Why am I feeling so responsible? Can some of the responsibility be on the people that I'm in a relationship with, and trusting that they can handle it because they're adult humans in the world too?
I love that. I love that so much.
Yeah. So much easier said than done, by the way. But spoiler alert.
True. Oh, goodness. Especially,
yeah,
because perfectionism, people pleasing, is very driven in this mix of hyper independence in certain parts and then dependence in other parts. And so us hyper independent folk asking for help, even trusting that is a different story, but even like saying yes to someone, saying like, hey, I'll take that off your hands. I remember the first time my husband did that with like, I think it was like either a bill or like calling the mechanic or something, but it jolted the crap out of me. I immediately got really defensive. I was like, I can do it myself. But like, why? Like, why?
Yeah.
And I had to talk it through. I think it goes to show that like us therapists, we are human just like you, and we have to talk through this stuff.
Yeah.
Where I'm like, I don't know why I reacted that way. And he was giving me all this kindness and compassion, and I want to help you. But like, there's a means of control in that too.
Yeah.
Like, when you set a boundary, when you say no, like it's a different type of control that just isn't familiar. So that can feel scary. And then just like whatever other burdens you have in your inner world, we're like trusting that someone's gonna do the thing. Get it? It's so jolting. Oh, when you said it, my heart was like, it's like, ooh.
Yeah.
You feel it.
Yeah. Or even when people are making offers, like genuinely, right? I thought about this over the weekend through the parenting lens. My husband and I haven't had, it is kind of a privilege to have family members who are readily available to help you care for your kids and to babysit and things like that. We haven't had a lot of that experience. And so, I mean, my hyper independence has definitely carried over into parenting, but then like having COVID babies and not having a lot of folks who can help with, date nights, whatever, those types of things. Like there is this level of independence that we're just engaged in our parenting life. And we have the loveliest neighbors, and, they care a lot for their grandkids and things like that. And over the weekend, I was thinking, because my neighbor, she was like, oh, just let the kids come over. Let them play in the basement. It's okay. And I was like, no. I don't want to put that on you. I don't want them to make a mess. Right. And I was like, no. And she's like, Sarah, let me take the kids. I've got all these grandkids. Don't worry about it. And I was like, no. I said no probably 800 times. But that was saying also a no to myself, because gosh, a break would have been super nice. But this level of hyper independence of like, I've had to do it all myself, so I need to continue to do it all myself. Right. It's so hard to break out of that pattern. Eventually they did go over there for like 15 minutes. So there was a yes. There was a yes
for you,
but still so hard. And I think you're right. This hyper independence, the perfectionism, the people pleasing, the hard time setting boundaries, they all go hand in hand.
And I love that your neighbor kept,
I know, she's like, Sarah,
kept showing up, because I think that matters, right? Like we've talked about the therapy space and safety, and a lot of that is like, I'm still going to be here and offer that support regardless of what part is showing up, right? And so, not that your neighbor is aware of parts work, but probably just not in a therapeutic sense, it's no burden to me, right? Like, kept telling you it's no burden to me. And, I think a lot of people in our lives, the people we care about, remind us of that time and time again. And it's, willingness and opportunity have to cross their path to a certain extent for that to happen. And certain times in my marriage, it was paying for groceries, and then the next time it was taking my car to the mechanic, and now I'm like, do whatever you want. You want to take over responsibility for the whole day? I'm down.
Like take
please
it.
do.
Take it.
This is what I want for lunch, and like you can clean up, and can you also take the trash out? Like I'm down for that. But that took a long time. A long time that trusting someone to help me does not change the dynamic of a relationship in an unsafe way.
Yes.
And that, time and trusting it enough to let it pan out and learn that that's safe over time. Now, I also think it's important to recognize that some of the boundaries that I've set in my life have led to the severing of relationships. So like not all of this is cute and fun.
Sunshine and rainbows. Yeah.
No.
And like 15-minute breaks from your kids. Yeah. Some of it is actually really painful. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's the great part, right? Yeah.
It definitely is. And I think, the more I knew what I wanted, the more starking it was that I knew what I didn't want. And if people in my life weren't going to respect that, weren't going to honor that, weren't going to let me feel safe around that, then a lot of the relationships just dissolve. And that goes into a whole different ballpark of like quality versus quantity of friends and loved ones. And, my world is maybe what the general society would say is pretty small. And that's due to a lot of the boundaries that I've set. But that feels comfortable for me. That feels safe for me. And I had to get over that hump of like, looking at my life and having all of these people and it mattered. Well, if I'm resentful and angry and burnt out most of the time, is it though?
Is it?
Is it?
Is it?
Am I showing up to events cranky and not wanting to go and feeling like I don't have, anybody helping me or supporting me? That's not a quality of life for me.
Yeah.
And the grief is hard. It takes time. But again, my same tools come with that, right? You don't do it alone. Name it for what it is, and go back to some safety tools as you process that. It takes time. And all of this is over the span of many years. So.
Right, many years. Yeah, absolutely. It's a journey. It's a lifelong thing, really, I think, honestly. I don't know that there's like a mastering it, but, and engaging and maybe backing away and then re-engaging and then discovering where else it's showing up in your world and, the dance. The dance.
One more thing I was going to throw in, going to food and body with this, the power of saying no, I remember for me was like this certain food item that I had bought at the store that was more like diet-esque my whole life. And I was like, I wonder what the real one tastes like.
Oh, yeah.
And I tried it and I was like, that's good. So I always make fun of like cauliflower rice as an example for my clients about setting boundaries around food.
Yeah.
And if somebody comes in to any of our platforms and can let me know that they thoroughly enjoy cauliflower rice, I'll give you $10.
$10 gift card to Starbucks.
$10 gift card to Starbucks, but I need video of you like eating it and enjoying it and loving it,
exuding from your being, the joy, right? Like we need to see the aura of joy. Yeah. Exactly.
So saying no and even yes to counteract some of the no's of foods that you like. I remember always being judged for being a plain eater, for being an eater that didn't like certain sauces and like cuisines and all that kind of stuff. And I had a grilled cheese with tomato soup last night and it was delightful.
Delish.
I can say no to certain foods and I can also say yes. It's like, because that's aligned with what makes me happy, what I enjoy, what's satisfying to me, and getting rid of things that don't taste good.
Yeah.
Like you don't have to eat certain things out of obligation to others, out of obligation to diet culture world, right? That takes time, obviously, and that's a big step, but I want people to know that the saying no and also honoring your yes crosses all roles in your life. So say no to cauliflower rice if you don't like it.
The take home, right? The headline.
just like eat whatever you were intentionally trying to eat in the first place, whatever
Uh-huh.
that is.
Yep, it's just coming home to yourself. Like, what does the no feel like? What does the yes feel like? How do you differentiate the two? There's the work with food, with body, with relationships, with work, with everything.
Yeah. Take your time. Small steps
Mm-hmm.
matter. Lean on people. Lean on safety.
Thank you, my friend.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
Always. All right, everybody. That's it for saying no for today. I'm sure we're going to keep talking about it over and over again because it's what we
Yes.
do. But we'll be back next week with another episode. And until then, take good care.